Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics live from University Stadium in Waterloo, Ontario, home of the Wilfrid Laurier Golden Hawks, where we are set to kick off the 116th Yates Cup, where those Golden Hawks are taking on the Western Mustangs, a rematch from the 115. We're going to go into all the details of this game. We're going to talk about the All-Stars, the other championship games going across the league C2C. We have a special guest coming up soon, but none of that matters before I say those magic words. Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
It's the Yates Cup. This is what every single team in the OUA is fighting for. It's one of the greatest trophies. It's the oldest trophy, but you and I have had the opportunity to hoist this thing. It is a beautiful hunk of metal. It's a lot heavier than what you think it is, but when you hoist that thing, the elation that you feel, this is the greatest trophy, and we've got two amazing teams fighting for it here today.
It's going to be an outstanding game. We have some other great championships going on across the league that we're going to go into. But some of the big news of the week, of course, was the All-Stars being announced as well as the major award winners. Speaking of major award winners, there's our guy, big number 13, reigning and now back-to-back MVP for the OUA and first team overall All-Star. But Tom, we want to talk about the All-Stars because obviously this caused a lot of conversation as it does every year. Both these teams were very well represented, but of course that doesn't stop either the fan bases from talking about who may have gotten snubbed and who may have been more deserving. We talked about it on the preview pod going into this week. What are some of your notes that you really took from this award season?
Well, when you look at this, you talk about the dominance of the Western Mustangs offense. You talk about the number one scoring offense in the entire country, and you only have one receiver who's an all-star, an OUA all-star. No quarterback, Evan Hillock, not even a second team OUA All-Star, and no running backs. Keanu Yazbek and Keon Edwards, both of them not OUA All-Stars. So needless to say, I think this Western Mustang squad is going to be a little bit slighted and come on with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder than they already had. But certainly that was what was the most surprising to be. The number one scoring offense doesn't have a quarterback or their running backs in there and only one receiver.
And we talked about this all year long in just what's making Western so dominant. And if you're Laurier fans or frankly fans of any of the other 10 programs that don't hail from London, Ontario, that's got to have you worried for two reasons. Number one, you know, it's a team that we talked about in Western who, despite winning back-to-back Yates Cups, is coming into this game today with a chip on their shoulder, knowing how their season has ended the past 2 years, falling in the U Sport semifinals. Both the teams out in Quebec, and you know those rivalries are strong last year in Montreal, 2 years ago in Laval. But as well, I think that speaks to what we've been talking about with this offense under offense coordinator Gaten Richard and the creativity that he brings into his offense where the ball gets spread around so much. And not that Laurier is any slouch getting the ball around. They have incredible weapons, and those weapons are represented well. But I think, again, it speaks to the fact that what makes Evan so special for this team and the championship demeanor that he brings is the fact that when you prepare for this team, and when we get into the offseason, we know we're going to be able to talk to different coordinators and people who've had to prep against this Western team. It's really hard to lock into one guy. It's a team that brings back all Canadians. It's a team that has the MVP from 2 years ago in Keon Edwards. And, of course, Evan is a Vanier Cup MVP. So I think you can look at it from the positivity side for Western on the offensive side of the ball. And I think for all these other teams, it's a little tough. Defensively, obviously, we saw no Max Nixon. What are some of your thoughts when we look at the defensive side of the ball with these All-Stars?
Well, I love the fact that we saw a showcase from Riley McLeod. He's been a stalwart at that middle linebacker position ever since he got to Western. So seeing him on there was great, but obviously no Max Nixon is certainly surprising. Jude Buchanan, I thought, had a really great campaign as well. We didn't see him either. But to see Max von Muhldorfer and Soren Hallschmidt get the rightfully deserved awards was certainly something that I was happy about. Of course, who else is going to get the outstanding defensive player of the year other than our guy in Jackson Finley? This man is outstanding at everything he does. When you ask of him, go out and cover some of the best receivers, he can do that no problem. His form tackling is outstanding. He was on special teams. And in the most recent games, we've seen him come into the box. We've seen him come down and spy some quarterbacks, really make sure that he can use his speed to take out your best player. Look for him to do something very similar in this game, because you know, with all of the outstanding weapons that Laurier has, he's going to be all over the field. He's going to be busy today.
And well represented as far as the major award winners. I want to get to those in 1 second. But just speaking of defensive back play, going back to the all-star lists in specific for the Golden Hawk faithful, obviously not seeing Malik Cote's name make those lists is a big question mark in their books. But the major award winners, we obviously referenced that our guy, number 13, Taylor Elgersma, now the back-to-back OUA MVP, the first time, and I think we looked at it earlier in the year, 20 years and change since Tommy Dennison was doing it for the Golden Gales. You mentioned, of course, Jackson Finley, our dude, and Eric Anderson, best tackle across the nation from sea to sea to sea, holding it down at the left tackle spot for this Western team. So, you know what? These are two clubs that, despite how deep our conference runs, we talk about that week in, week out, how tight these matchups are from 1 through 11 now. From 1 through 11, this is the matchup people wanted. This is the matchup from last year that we got to see now, the fourth iteration of these two teams battle in 2 years. Now, Tom, we are expecting the president and CEO of the OUA, Gord Grace, to grace us with his time and his appearance momentarily. And I know we want to get into a bit of the C2C action with the other conference championships games going on. But obviously, with Taylor winning the OUA MVP, it raises the question now that we're getting into national semifinal territory and conference championship territory of who is going to be winning the Craton award this year for the best player in all of Canada. Why don't you get us set up before Mr. Grace joins us as far as who we're looking at in those other conferences? We'll obviously be talking about them when we get to C2C, and we can have a little bit of that conversation about Craton.
Absolutely. When you start looking at the entirety of this league, and especially in the Canadian game, the pass game is so important here. And of course, you're going to see quarterbacks who are well represented in here. All four of the different conference MVPs are quarterbacks again this year. Out of the Can West, Jackson Tuchinski, quarterback for the Manitoba Bisons. Out of the OUA, obviously, we talked about it. Number 13, Taylor Elgersma here. Out of the RSCQ, Arnaud Desjardins. There will be no repeat for Jonathan Senecal in this one. And out of the East, out of the AUS, Justin Curion. Out of Bishops, that he has been playing outstanding football by far. But when you see the production here, when you see the growth of these quarterbacks, that's really what I want to bring to mind here. It's certainly, we've seen Taylor, we've seen how well he is and everything that he does. But here, the one that I want to really highlight here is Arnaud Desjardins. Last year in 2023, he's the starting quarterback for Laval. He goes 140 completions for 204 attempts, 68% completions, 12 touchdowns with 8 interceptions. This year, Desjardins comes out 189 completions on 249 attempts, 75% completion rating, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception. The growth of this young man has been nothing short of fantastic. How well he's been able to adapt to the system, adapt to the outstanding defenses that they play against, like a Montreal team, which, by the way, we mentioned 8 interceptions last year, 7 of those to the Montreal Caravan in 3 games. In this year, 5 touchdowns so far, 0 picks against the nation's best defense. This is an outstanding development for this young man in the RSCQ, and we're only going to see him get better and better as this goes on because, like Western, Laval has been to these big games before. They know how to perform here. They don't get spooked by the noise and the lights and everything else. They're going to be out here and they're going to play some of their best football.
Yeah, again, those numbers are so staggering when you look at, again, the fact that he's having to play this Montreal defense that returns so many players from that Vanier Cup champion team last year that touted as so many people were looking at. Historically, one of the best defenses we had ever seen, returning a lot of those players, obviously a lot of the same people at the helm of those programs. You know, obviously Jackson Tuchinski, to go to him because he's the one guy who isn't being represented on this weekend in terms of the conference championships with the Regina Rams pulling up the upset against Manitoba last week. And I think one of the big things to talk about with his game, because when you go through the numbers and obviously, we'll talk about what our guy Elgersma has been doing all year long if, you haven't been paying attention because it's been pretty spectacular. Tuchinski's numbers don't jump off the page, and you talked about how a lot of it is the function of the way that they operate in the red zone, but we know our guy Elgersma can score with his feet as well, getting, 6 rushing touchdowns himself. He is the short yardage QB for them. When you look at, for 65, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Obviously, that's not going to knock your socks off but he averages somewhere in the ranks of 70 rush yards per game, gets 6 touchdowns. The versatility he brings to the table. Obviously, we get into C2C. We're not going to be mentioning his name. I want to give a little shine to the rep out of Can West because you got to see him up in person, up close and personal at East West a couple months back. It's a special young kid. Don't let the numbers fool you.
No, absolutely. And the big thing that Jackson Tuchinski can do, and the reason why he is so good at what he does, is of course the numbers are there. Of course he's got the athletic ability, but he creates plays for the rest of his receivers and for the rest of his guys here. When you have somebody like a Braden Stubbs behind you who can run the ball just as effectively as anybody else in Canada can, you've got an outlet pass there for sure. But when he takes off and runs with it, not only does he have the ability to actually burn guys and really go down the field, but he's got his guys who he can throw to. A.K. Kasama is one of the best receivers in the Can West. Absolutely. One of the receivers for Manitoba, and that connection there is why they've done so well.
Now, Tom, we're going to keep the conversation going because we're going to get into our C2C where we'll talk about so many of these great players and more. But I believe joining us now, we have the president and CEO of OUA Sports, Gord Grace. So much.
Come on in.
Come on in.
Hot seat, eh? Hot seat.
Good stuff.
Excellent.
Good to be here. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for
Thanks
having
for what you do. Promoting university football in Canada. It's critical.
We appreciate you, sir.
All
Thank
right,
you.
good. We
Thank
should
you
have
so
you
much.
set you up at the 55. Very good.
Next year.
Excellent.
Gord, this is obviously the pinnacle of OUA football. This day, we know 116 iterations of it. It's a major award when you look at all awards in sports in North America. You've been part of OUA for so long now. What does this day mean for you? What are some of the things that you just look forward to on these special days?
Well, we want a great match, a great game. I think we're going to get it. I was telling people for the last week that, Major League Baseball was bragging about Yankees Dodgers. This is our equivalent, right? We got our top 2 teams, so teams with amazing tradition and great competition. So, yeah, we're hoping this will be the pinnacle of our season. This is our 50th game of the season, right? And so let's hope it's the best one. The weather might be the best of all season too, right?
You said it.
Yeah.
Absolutely outstanding atmosphere today. We've got a sold-out crowd here, which is always what we're looking for, to get as many people into the stands. For the folks who can't be here, we've seen OUA TV obviously in a few iterations, but getting better and better and better as years have gone on. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into that and how much you're really working with the universities to get our game out there as best as we possibly
Yeah,
can?
I mean, it's been a great tool for us, OUA, a great platform, I guess I should say. OUA TV, we want to continue to make it better. Our schools are investing more and more into it. We still want to give an opportunity for young people to hone their skills, whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera. So, but today's game, we're going to be on CBC Gem as well. We're going to be on local Rogers. And then Game Plus is picking up this game too. So there's be a lot of viewers today for this game. So we're excited about it. Yeah, sure.
Gord, just picking up off that, obviously we have our platform. There's a number of other folks trying to bring attention to this game because we know the talent on the field is so spectacular. Looking forward, are there any things that you can talk about as far as the OUA, the growth in that avenue, as far as bringing more eyes and attention to the spectacular play, as far as a 3-5 year plan that's down the road?
Yeah, we do have a digital plan, and a promotion plan. The two are tied together. And let's face it, with all the technology and all the opportunity now, we got to do a better job taking advantage of it, and we are. We're really taking it. So we talked about bringing back such things as Broadcast View, have our own little webinar series and actual conference in around doing more and more of this. So it's only going to get bigger and better, I think, for sure.
Oh, outstanding. And when you see all of the outstanding individuals that go into a production like this, and the local talent, not only having a guy like Marshall Ferguson on the play-by-play, but to have a guy like Jack Moore doing color commentary, who's a part of this community and really getting things going, I think that does so much for the game itself. And we're seeing it year after year. Better production, better performance, better everything surrounding our great games here. When you look at the quality of the OUA, certainly in some of the athletes that are here, we've been talking about it. It seems like, despite the fact that we've seen a guy like Michael Falls, who is now coaching in this game, and the outstanding play there, but the quarterback play and everything on the field is just getting better and better and better.
Well, we talked about that at our athletic banquet, our football awards on Thursday. We had Randy Ambrosi from the CFL there. We had Minister Lumsden there. both who played university football, and I think it's they that said it. The players are way better each and every time. The coaching is better. The facilities are better. Laurier is building a new stadium here, for example. So everything's gotten better. The broadcasting gotten better. But on the field, yeah, it's exciting. I mean, a day like today, they're going to be throwing that ball all over the place. Big hits, big runs. You can tell I'm an offensive guy. I coached here before too. I coached at Laurier, played at Waterloo. So being here is kind of cool for me personally. But it's all about the players today, and let's hope they play their best, right?
And we see the Laurier players making their way out to the field along with Coach Faulds there, looking like it's absolutely business time. Obviously, with the Vanier Cup being in Kingston, it's youth sport production and everything of that nature. You talk about Laurier here getting the new facility. Richardson Stadium obviously is one of the most beautiful facilities that we have. What does it mean to you from the OUA perspective, knowing that hosting things like national championships, and I'm certain across the multitude of sports in OUA, we get those opportunities, but 2 years in a row now, having the Vanier Cup in our province, what does that mean for OUA football?
No, I think it's great. It's great for youth sport. Kingston's obviously a very good football community, great football community. Queens has done a good job hosting that game, hosting all their games. So I think for youth sport, it's worked out well. We'll see how the final matchups work out. I mean, I'm pretty much assured. No, I won't say that. I really want an OUA team. I coached out Canada too. So our winner will go and play the AUS champ, and then that will go on and play, whoever wins the Mitchell Bowl. So it'll be great. But I'm sure youth sport will take the best teams that come. But if there are schools that are closer proximity, then the alumni can rally and go to Kingston. So we'll see how it all turns out.
Yeah, certainly from a fan perspective, we'd be lying if we didn't say we're hoping for a Quebec versus Ontario matchup, because in Kingston, you'll get the best turnout there, and certainly those fans from the RCQ love to travel.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we're actively looking at to get more fan engagement? Because in some of these big games, we're getting these sellout crowds and the homecoming games and everything else. What are some of the other aspects that we're really trying to get fans engaged into this?
Well, again, like what we're doing here today.
Yeah.
It really is, because you see some of this and you go, I got to get to a game. I got to go see that player live. I got to see him. And that really encourages people to come out to the game. We've been lucky too with the weather.
Yes,
like not just today,
so.
the whole season
Yeah.
and that. So attendance is really up in the OUA. But certainly that's what we're trying to do. Get more and more people come to our games. There's lots of competition up there. There's more pro sport than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I think that we offer is being authentic. Like, our student athletes, they're here because they're at school and they really want to compete. Our coaches are unbelievable across the OUA. And so people that come to our games, they can feel that and they get attached to it. So just need to get people come to our games, and I think it sticks.
Gord, the last thing I want to ask you about, and it pairs well with what we were just talking about there. Tom and I have been to games all across the province this year, and it's the first year I think we're seeing where some stadiums, and maybe it's a university decision, are allowing people to have alcohol in the stands versus beer tents. It seems like it's university to university. I'm curious, are there discussions in terms of, obviously when we compare to, say, the product in the States, the way they do college football, that's a huge jump, that's a huge lead. But in terms of that aspect, certainly it's an inextricable link when you talk about live sports from that aspect.
Well, by the way, Bud Light is our sponsor of our broadcast today, so good segue for that.
There we go.
But again, it's really about socializing, right? People want to socialize, and when we socialize, we have a beer in our hands. And so we leave it up to every school to figure out where they have a beer area, where they have the licensing there. But again, my alma mater, Michigan, this is the first year ever they've allowed beer in the stadium. So in some ways, we're ahead of all that. But you think of what they've done at the Rogers Center with these meeting areas. It's changed the configuration because people want to come together, celebrate sport, and celebrate friendship. And I think that's all part of it.
Gord, I can't tell you how much we appreciate everything that you've done. The growth of the OUA, the growth of the game, and what we're seeing in the quality of it directly comes down to you and your team, and we appreciate everything that you've been doing for us here in our great game. And you don't have to say it, but we will. In the best conference across the U Sports here in the OUA.
Okay, so thanks for the props, but I will say this. We do have a slogan around here, "We are one," and I really feel like everybody's working on this together. Like alumni, the media, the coaches, they're all part of elevating what we do here. So credit to all them too.
Gord, you gonna make a pick for us while we have you on air?
Picking up Purple's team too.
Gord Grace, President and CEO of the OUA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you, sir.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good one.
That was outstanding. Again, we were just joined by Gord Grace, President and CEO of the OUA. And again, not just football. This is the man that takes care of OUA sport.
Everything.
Every team, every school. And of course, it's beyond just the 11 schools in OUA football. It's every school that has any type of football programming. That was outstanding. Anything just off the jump from what he said you want to pick up on, Tom?
Yeah, the big piece about that is when you talk about him, you can obviously tell that the fan engagement is definitely something that he's going to be focusing on. For the folks who have been watching OUA TV, we've seen the quality jump year after year after year, certainly at certain universities, and especially with partnering now with people like Rogers TV and partnering with CBC Gem. We're only going to get better and better at broadcasting our great game, and we appreciate all of the external partners, including Bud Light, the official sponsor today. That's fantastic to see, and all that we want. The whole reason that Zach and I do our thing is because we want to get more exposure to the phenomenal athletes that we have, not just in the OUA, but in all of Canada. So to see that growth is something I'm really, really excited for.
And let's get back to those phenomenal players, not just in the OUA, but across all of youth sports. We were in the middle of talking about the Het Craton race with the OUA, RSCQ, AUS, and Can West MVPs we have respectively. Tom, the only thing I wanted to add on from where we last left off is that obviously when it comes to football, and the OUA and youth sports is no different, MVP often becomes a quarterback award, which obviously we're 4 for 4 in that measure this year. 2 years ago, we have our guy, Keon Edwards, winning it out of the OUA. Obviously, Malcolm Bussey out of AUS last year.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to have a non-quarterback MVP this year, who are some of the names that you might think of? I think of a guy, obviously, like Riker Frank,
Yes.
who we're going to be seeing playing for Saskatchewan today. But who are some of the guys that, when you think of who might have possibly bucked the trend of MVP being a quarterback award, that come to mind for you?
Well, certainly when you look at the Can West, you can't look past what Riker Frank does. In the regular season, 152 rushes for 952 yards on the ground and 10 touchdowns. What he's able to do in that Saskatchewan offense is nothing short of incredible. So certainly he's one who pops to mind. Obviously, in the OUA is Ethan Jordan.
Yes.
When you look at the production that man has had, the 1,000 yards receiving and everything else that's going on, he has to be somebody that jumps up to the top. But for me, in the RCQ, it's Olivier Cool.
Yes.
That receiving for Laval is a big part of why Arnaud Desjardins, along with his own progression, but has gotten so much better into this year. Olivier Cool this year, 52 catches, which is tied second in all of Canada, 721 yards receiving, and 10 touchdowns, which is tied for first, and our guy, Ethan Jordan. What Olivier Cool has been doing has been nothing short of amazing in the RSEQ. And I was really going into the AUS and trying to find some names in there. But to be honest with you, Justin Curion and what he's been able to do with this Bishop Gators team, especially once again when you talk about the growth and what he's been doing into next year, I really love everything that I'm seeing. And obviously, to me, he's the best pick there.
And we'll be going through his numbers in more detail when we get into our seat briefly. Last little detail to just throw in, just as people keep their eyes and ears peeled on the Het Craton race. You mentioned, obviously, Justin Curion being the nominee out of the AUS. The last time the AUS properly had a Het Craton Award winner, we're going back to 2007 out of SMU, who's also represented in that Loney Bowl today, and Eric Glavick. Now, Bishops did have a Het Craton Award winner back when you and I were playing, and Jordan Heather, but they were still in the RSCQ at that point. Obviously, for the RSCQ, they had last year in Jonathan Senecal, 2 years ago, in having Kevin Mittal. So talking about receivers winning the award. For the OUA, it was Trey Ford back in 2021. And out of Can West, it was Adam Sinagra for Calgary back in 2018. So a lot of representation. Can West in the last 10 years, actually with 5 of the Het Craton winners in the last 10 years. AUS getting none, OUA with 2. And the RCQ with 3 in there in the mix. Tom, anything left on the Het Craton, or do you think it's time to jump in to C2C?
We've been talking a lot about everything else. Let's get into these great games. This is conference championship time now, man.
Let's go. Where are we starting, Tom?
We're going to start. You know what? We're going to start in the East, just
All
to
right,
switch
let's do
things
it.
up a little bit more. We're going to start with SMU against Bishops. We talked about this a little bit on the preview pod, but we've seen Bishops and we've seen the great production that they've had on offense. Obviously, everything that they did to Acadia just last week, putting up 56 points, and obviously previously putting up 70 points in there. Every time they played against St. Mary's, that outstanding defense that you've highlighted a few times has played fantastic. They've only lost a combined 7 points to St. Mary's here, and they are low-scoring affairs. Now, that St. Mary's defense is outstanding, but that offense has really not been performing nearly as well as the defense has. That's the only thing that's got me really concerned here going into this one.
Yeah, and obviously the defense has been huge for them. You talked about how with St. Mary's going to the first matchup against Bishops, they were trotting out a different quarterback than Alan Young, who's really taken on strong for them. That last matchup they had, you know what? The fumbles is kind of what killed St. Mary's and really stalled them. They were getting the interceptions that obviously has been keeping that defense as one of the best in the league, and penalties as well, which is frustrating when you know that you're the underdog, the underhusky, whatever you want to call it on this day for St. Mary's, to be able to have those mistakes being made. But nonetheless, this is a St. Mary's team that if you look at the numbers and just say, well, it's 8-0 versus 4-4. It's a team that's averaging, 40 points a game versus a team that's averaging like low 20s. It's a team that's limiting teams to 16 points per game against a team that's limiting about 19. So defensively, again, that's where St. Mary's has it. But when we look at the matchups, much like in the RCQ, much like in the Can West, we get the repeated battles. It's a point differential in those two wins for Bishops of about 6 points, 5 points and change if you want to get a little nitty gritty with it. St. Mary's team, you can't sleep on them. And you know what? It might be a little bit of, reading the tea leaves, but I think there's something to be said about, for St. Mary's, a true blue AUS team trying to rep the East Coast in that one. Tom, what other notes do you have with this matchup here?
Well, the big thing that I'm really excited about with the AUS here, we've talked about it, especially coming out of the RSEQ, the team that is able to get out of the RSEQ, which for the past 11 years has been either Laval or Montreal, is the team who's been playing better defense. Both of these teams, while St. Mary's, sure, their offense isn't nearly as productive as Bishop's offense has been, at least in the regular season, both play outstanding defense, which to me is very exciting about the future of AUS football and potentially getting back into the semifinal and even Vanier Cups. Because if you can play outstanding defenses against anybody, that's really where the opportunities start to unload. Now, obviously, this year they're playing against a team in the OUA, so we're pulling for the team in the OUA. But to see the growth and to see the production out of these teams in the AUS, to get them back into the national conversation would be an outstanding feat that hasn't been done for a long time. When you look at, we've mentioned great defenses. Bishop still, I know I read these numbers off previously, 16 points per game, averaging 56 yards on the ground, which is unbelievable, and 234 in the air. Certainly, if you want to get anything done against this team, it's got to be through the air because they don't allow anything on the ground. Alan Young, I believe, is going to be the starting quarterback for the St. Mary's Huskies. He certainly struggled in some of his debuts, but he's got some great receivers. He's got some great options in there to give them a chance. It's really going to come down to who can actually score the ball in either of these great defenses. And for that, I'm taking the Bishop Gators in this one. They're 8-0 for a specific reason, and they were able to squeak out tight wins against St. Mary's in the previous two iterations. So I'm taking Bishops here.
And the number I don't think we've read off yet that, again, makes Bishop so scary is that they're sacking quarterbacks left, right, and center, 27 on the year. And we've talked about that these two teams have played each other tight. We've talked about that both teams have stellar defenses, that St. Mary's looks like they've gone to Alan Young at the quarterback position. And I love you brought just the general resurgence we're seeing of AUS football because St. FX under Coach Gary Waterman has been doing outstanding in those national semifinal games that we've been seeing, whether it was against Saskatchewan a couple years ago where they nearly picked up that win to punch their ticket to the Vanier Cup. Last year as well, given a strong performance. And we obviously look at not just Coach Waterman, but obviously Malcolm Bussey, but Silas Fagnon, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And I bring all of that up, not just again to talk on your point of AUS football ascending, because there's a strong case to be made aside from the win, which is a good testament to an individual quarterback performance. I'd say Alan Young outdueled Silas Fagnon in that semifinal game last year. I made my pick already, so if you're tuning in week to week and on the pods, you already know I'm going with the underdog in this one. I'm going Huskies to pick up the win and represent the AUS in the national semifinal.
I absolutely love it, my man. Coming out of the AUS, we're going to go into the RSEQ, where for the 11th year in a row, we see the Caravan take on the Rougeard. In this iteration, Montreal is traveling to Laval, despite the fact that they split the series 1-1, because Montreal only won by a single point in their iteration. Laval locks up the number 1 seed, so they are the ones who are hosting here. And while both squads have outstanding fan bases, when you go from a stadium in Montreal that hosts 6,000 to 20,000, that's a massive jump. And from what I've been told, that stadium is sold out for another iteration of the Dunsmore between these two teams.
No, absolutely. I mean, you've obviously got to play in some major games in that stadium. I got to play an exhibition game in Montreal. It might be 6,000, but the way that stadium is set up, it makes the 6,000 sound like 16,000. So no slouches to those big moments. And obviously, talking about big moments, we are talking about the incumbent champions, the reigning champions, with the reigning hack, with the reigning stand-up defensive player of the year in Harold Missan. This is a team that is from the first man to the last man on that roster is so outstanding. Now, you talked about Olivier Cool as being a possible, if it weren't going to go to Desjardins, non-quarterback MVP on that team. Now, when we talk about defensive players, we obviously know some of those names with Montreal, who we've been seeing, whether it's Missant, whether it's Ojo, whether it's Roy. A guy in Justin Cloutier for Laval that you were talking about earlier in this year, and him getting after the quarterback is something that I think is a major point of contention for this game. This is a Laval defense that, as we said, has been averaging less than 2 majors, 13 points and change. A guy like Cloutier obviously playing a large part in that matchup. We know in our heart of hearts that this is going to be a defensive matchup because it wouldn't be Laval versus Montreal. Who are some of the people that you're looking at that are going to make it that type of a battle on this day?
Oh my goodness. When you look at the outstanding play that Laval has had as a team defense, that's really where they come out. Wow, you look at Montreal and you say Jeremiah Ojo, Harold Missant. Of course, those are unbelievable players. But when you look at a Laval team with a guy like Cloutier, with a guy like Bolduc, with a guy like St. Hilaire, of course they're doing outstanding stuff there. But it's all a part of the general team. There's no individual player on Laval's defense that you stick out and go, oh my God, this person's got 15 sacks or they've got all these interceptions. But they play together as a defense, and that's a Glenn Constantine defense. That's the mentality that he brings into this. When you start looking at numbers across, like you mentioned, 13.3 points per game, number 1 in all of Canada. 297 yards per game, 184 in the air, and only 113 on the ground. Once again, you talk about how outstanding everything is. 6 interceptions, 6 fumbles, 28 sacks. This is a team that gets after the quarterback, and they do it some of the best in all of Canada here. And just 4 rungs down, if Laval is the number 1 defense, it's the Montreal defense at number 4. It's why these teams are so good, and it's why each year whoever wins the RCQ is the immediate favorite to win the Vanier Cup, because they're going up against such outstanding players day after day after day in that conference. Well, when the two of them play, everybody else, it's getting better, but it's not quite there yet.
Well, and you mentioned with them being right there. I mean, the 28 sacks is incredible. It's 26 for Montreal. It's 6 interceptions for Laval. It's 8 for Montreal. It's giving up 297 yards for Laval. It's 308 for Montreal. So from that standpoint, again, it's hard to really decipher where you find those edges one way or the other, but we're making picks. So where are you seeing the edges to make your pick in this game?
I'm seeing a Montreal squad that returned a lot of their key players. They returned their Craton winner and Jonathan Senecal. Jeremiah Ojo just won the lineman of the year for the RSEQ. Harold Missant, everybody who's coming back from that squad, they're talented, they're well-versed, and they've been in these big games before. But when you look over at the Laval team, the Rouge et Or, you see the production that defense has got now number 1 in all of Canada. I read out some of the numbers earlier, but Arnaud Desjardins is playing his absolute best football I have seen him play. He went from throwing 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions last year in 3 games against Montreal to, in these 2, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. A big part of that is Olivier Cool and the production and the chemistry that they have together for sure. But that offensive line for Laval is playing outstanding. They've always got monsters on that side who can move well for sure. And with his reading and his abilities, I'm taking Laval, Rouge et Or to win at home for another Dunsmore Cup.
Well, obviously, the last time we saw Desjardins pair up with a prime time number 1, no doubt about a target. They were winning a Vanier Cup 2 years ago, and that individual was winning a Craton along with it. I'm not overthinking this one from the standpoint of where you started. We know those names on Montreal with the defense being as stout as it's been. And we talked about how Jackson Zaczynski can kill you with his feet and with his arm, as we know. And Senecal is no different there. The way he can make off-platform throws and pick up yards and pick up touchdowns on the ground. So I'm going to go with Montreal to repeat out of the RSCQ and hoping to book their ticket back to another Yates Cup. But they'll have to go through the team that makes it out of Can West. We know we got to jump over the OUA to save the best for last as we see some of the Laurier Golden Hawks making their way back to the locker room after a bit of the warm-up here. Let's take our talents out west, Tom, and talk a little Saskatchewan football.
Let's go, baby. We got the Banjo Bowl happening in U Sports football. This is outstanding. When you look, for those of you who haven't seen it before, both teams, number 1 and number 2 teams from Can West, were upset last week. Manitoba and UBC, who were the favorites to play in the Hardy Cup, are both out. So we've got the University of Saskatchewan against the Regina Rams in this one. And when you look at these outstanding teams, the parity in Can West is so incredible. So despite the fact that we have a 3 seed and a 4 seed, this is going to be some fantastic football. Once again, these teams sharing wins, 1-1 with both squads in the regular season here. And what we've seen from Regina, certainly in the last game that they had against Manitoba, able to move the ball very well. Noah Peltier is a real deal quarterback. He's got some great receivers that he can throw to, but we're seeing that progression. We're seeing that smarts, not forcing anything in there, being smart with the football and really making sure that he's finding his guys in a great position in order to score. Now, when you look over at Saskatchewan, Anton Ammonroot, the gunslinger for them, quarterback 1 for them. He is not afraid at all to rip the ball down the field. And when you've got guys like Daniel Weave and Red Barva, I wouldn't be afraid either. You give those guys a chance at a jump ball, and chances are they're coming down with it. I'm expecting a high-powered offensive game in this one.
Yeah, and you know what? Obviously, we talked about what Riker Frank can do on the ground as well. It's interesting when you compare the way that Peltier is getting the ball around with his guys like Deshaun Mims and Nicholas Senleaf, who are pretty much toe-to-toe with the production that they're doing. Whereas you talk about a guy like Daniel Weave, you talk about a guy like Riker Frank, a bit of the more known. Saskatchewan, in some ways, has the advantage of having been on the national stage. In some regards, at least from our standpoint, there's a little bit of the known there as well of, well, here's how they're going to try and move the ball. Obviously, as you mentioned, with what Anton's been doing out there at the quarterback position, they were at those national level games with another quarterback. But Regina being a bit of the new kid on the block at this stage here, these teams play each other so many times. Obviously, it's a Banjo Bowl rematch and everything of that nature. Where do you see it from the standpoint of, yeah, St. Mary's making it to that Loney Bowl, bit of a surprise, obviously taking out St. FX. We could say probably the same thing with Regina being the only other team we'd look at of saying, okay, you're up here on this big stage where we don't always see it, we don't always expect you. What aspect do you think that's going to play in with this game where Sask's been there, they've done that, they've been in higher leverage games, they've been in a lot of these matchups for the conference finals. What do you look at from that perspective?
When you look at the outstanding play from Can West, typically each conference tends to have some similarities with the people who are coming out. We talked about previously in the OUA, the Western effect of being able to establish the run, being able to score, and being able to play great defense is kind of the quote-unquote formula for getting out of the OUA, certainly in the RCQ, great defense and so forth. With Can West, it's really the offensive explosions that we're seeing time after time after time. And when you see all of the incredible athletes on offense, it's not a curious as to why. But with that, because you've got outstanding offenses across the league, that's what gives you that parity. That's what gives you that anybody can win at any time here. And that's certainly what happened last week when these teams played against each other, or when they played against the number 1 and number 2 seeds. Going into this one, when you look at things, Regina actually has the number 7 defense in the nation here, at least by points per game, only giving up 22.1. When you look at the production that's here, 11 interceptions in this one, 11 sacks as well, not essentially getting after the quarterback, great at making sure that they're defending against that, which when you have a guy like an Anton Ammonroot who loves to throw the ball around, being able to pick the ball up is going to be such an important aspect of this. Saskatchewan, certainly the more high-powered offense as compared to their defense. The defense right now, 29.1 points per game. So really interested to see how well that comes along and why, in my head, I'm thinking whoever's holding the ball last is really going to be the one who wins this game.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it. And we've talked about this with some of the teams in the OUA, and that's probably going to be a commentary we make with this matchup here, where sometimes that high-powered offense can make the numbers when you look at how the defense performs seem a little bit less than stellar. We'll talk about Laurier and Western briefly. For just Laurier, by comparison, a team who's one of the most high-powered offenses, probably the most high-powered offense in the nation. By the numbers, the passing defense looks a little bit less than stellar, but we know the names. We know how good they actually are in the back end. When you look at Saskatchewan, a team that's averaging just about 30 points per game, but then is giving up around the same on the defensive side of the ball, we know some of those teams are having to go up against who are great offenses out west, as you highlighted. Do you chalk it up to more of the function of, hey, you're going up against great offenses, and at a certain point, those teams, those UBCs of the world, those Manitobas, Wichinski are going to score their points, and a little bit of Sask scoring their points, and that as a result, teams are having to throw the ball, playing catch up. We talk about what a pro-style football Can West likes to play. Or is there a possible little bit of a, maybe that's an area where Peltier and his weapons are going to have the type of success, and maybe to the point you just made, it's going to be last team to have the ball. What do you think is more of a product of from that standpoint?
I really think it is the fact that everybody plays such outstanding offense in Can West. You have to have something that's able to come back at that. When you talk about a team that can score at will, certainly like these Laurier Golden Hawks, if you're not able to score and keep up with them in that regard, you're going to get back, you're going to get behind real fast. And when you see outstanding quarterback play across this, not only Garrett Rooker, are the Can West MVP, Jackson Tuchinski, but Noah Pelletier, but Anton Ammonrood, and everybody else in there, you can see how well these guys can throw the ball and how well they can score. So, of course, you have to be able to replicate that. Now, defensively, we haven't seen a real strong and stout defense from either of these teams going into this year. But what I will say is I like the Saskatchewan Huskies in this one, and they are my pick to go into this because they've been in so many tight games and they've been able to come out on the other side of it. You and I have talked about it previously. When you have a team like a Western Mustangs or like another team that's a dominant, even a Laval Rouge et Or, that's so used to dominating teams year after year after year, now suddenly when you get in a scenario where you're down a score or two, there can be that we're in unfamiliar territory and be a little bit of a sweat start rolling down and everything. The Saskatchewan team has been in tight games. They've come out on the other side of it, certainly beating UBC in UBC as an outstanding feat. So I'm taking the Huskies to win this one and win the Hardy Cup for the first time since 2022.
I'm right there with you, picking the Huskies on this day. And you know what? If these defenses do come to play the way we know they can, I just have more trust in Riker Frank being able to say, all right, if it's a low-scoring affair, which, you know what, when it comes to championship time, and we're about to talk about the championship game we have here where we might see a bit of similarity, Marshall Erickson has had a good year for Regina. Riker Frank has had an outstanding year for Saskatchewan. I'm right there with you with the Huskies. Tom, outstanding job as always on the C2C action to now bring us home to the best conference in all U Sports football in the OUA, where we now have the 116th iteration of the Yates Cup, the rematch from last year, with now Laurier hosting Western, a flip of the script from last year in so many ways, with Western being 8-0 last year and then hosting to now Laurier being 8-0 and hosting, the records being a product of just losing to one another in those respective years. Now we're going to get into the matchup. I want to just briefly, Tom, because we talked about All-Stars, we talked about Heck Cratons, and the Evan Hillock piece of not being an all-star on this year is obviously notable. I put together a little list here. I shared it with you yesterday. Again, just the function of how deep our league is right now. Before we dive into this action, if there were, and I didn't go through every single position here because it got a little late in the night doing this. But you look at the possibility of a third team OUA All-Star list. It could look something like this: Evan Hillock at QB, running backs Keanu Yazbek, Joey Zorn, receivers Mohsen Jamal, Avery Ford. I think would have been a really awesome pick to be able to see him get an all-star nod with what York did this year. Frederick Hatchie, that Carleton passing attack, and what the young kid Elijah Barnes was doing. And then our guy here, Leomi Talayo, just adding in what he does without the ball in his hands makes him such a deadly threat. Some of the defensive guys we didn't see. Another Golden Hawk who I think has been slept on all year long. Mari Hastings, Chisholm and Sedum in the middle, has obviously been outstanding for this Laurier team. We're going to talk about that defense, but Amari Hastings done a great job getting after the quarterback. I won't go through every single name. We talked about Max Nix not being on this list. We talked about our guy Malik Cote not being on this list. Ashton Millen, Melanson not making an All-Star out of Queens, and Dawson Hodge as well not being able to pick up an award. Again, I won't go through every single name I put together, but it's such a deep conference we have. It's a great matchup we have today, and the fact that both these teams are coming into this game, and we know what a Michael Fultz pregame speech looks and sounds like. Both these teams are arguably coming in with a no. Our chip on our shoulder is bigger than your. No, the chip on my shoulder is a little bit bigger. These teams are well represented at the All-Star level. It's a deep conference. How do you feel about these two teams matching up, coming off of the All-Star and the major award winners?
It's really outstanding because when you look at the major award winners, of course, they got those awards for a specific reason. You see the production out of these guys. But I'm really interested in seeing the production from everybody else on those lists. We talked about Seth Robertson being a real key factor for the Western Mustangs and everything he's able to do. And he's outstanding at scoring touchdowns. But Braden Masseri, his resurgence, especially in the last half of the year, was nothing short of amazing. The fact that they can rely on him so consistently and he's able to shake off tacklers and make outstanding catches with his body frame is something that I think gets overlooked a whole lot when you've got a Mohsen Jamal, when you've got a Daniel Kambongo, a Dasani McIntosh. Of course, there's so many weapons. I would look for Braden Masseri to have a big game in this one. I think he's really going to come off. Of course, Keanu Yazbek, of course, Keon Edwards are going to be factors into this one for sure. But Braden Masseri and the production that we've seen out of him, I'm really, really high on this young man. I think we're going to see a lot from him.
And that pairs well with talking about a guy like Leomi Ojitalayo, where when you compare the skill position groups of these two teams, starting with the quarterbacks, Hillock and Elgersma. I mean, it's sell tickets just on that alone. You look at having the top receivers in Ethan Jordan and Seth Robertson. You look at the number twos, and I guess this is where we now mention that number two for Laurier in Raiden Thorne is out for this game, which we'll talk about that in more detail. But you compare him with someone like Mohsen Jamal in just the surest of sure hands, the raw athleticism, and you get to that third weapon. And obviously it goes deeper than three with Leomi. And as he said, with Masseri and how tough they are, how they're willing to do the dirty work, and all things like that. Obviously, Raiden Thorne, that's a huge loss for this team. OUA All-Star, one of the best, as you were claiming last year, early in the season, best hands in U Sport football. Possibly that pairs with Western missing Ethan Dolby. We don't know his status, but I bring that up because last year in this matchup that we saw, there was no Keon Edwards for Western. There was no Keanu Yazbek.
Yep.
And Dolby went off for 120 yards on his own. We know the kid's only gotten better this year, that he's missing him. It sucks that we get to a championship game and we're short some of those key figures. We know a couple defensive guys have come back for Laurier that we'll talk about briefly. From that standpoint, no Raiden Thorne and probably no Ethan Dolby. How does that factor in with what these offenses will do on this day?
Well, it's a next man up mentality, certainly at Western. We've seen that year after year after year. And we're going into this Guelph game going, oh, wow, I think Ethan Dolby's out. And then it's, well, Keanu Yazbek and Keon Edwards, I think they're still pretty good. And not to say that they're not going to miss him because Ethan Dolby brings another aspect there, but they can certainly make do with what they've got. And similarly at Laurier, if there's going to be one area that they can afford to have somebody go down. Now, Raiden Thorne is a phenomenal receiver. And anytime you lose him, no matter what, you can't just replace a guy like that. But when you got guys like, Ethan Jordan on one side, and then it's Leomi Ojitalayo, and then it's Ryan Spader, and then it's Jace Atkinson, of course you're thinking this is fine. Previously, before we started the stream, I was talking with head coach Michael Fultz, and he was mentioning to me in some of their off-season workouts, sometimes Taylor's not able to make it because he's down in London. That's where he lives. That's where he's from. So he's out there. Coach Fultz out there slinging the rock. Let me tell you, he's still got it. But when he comes back and he talks to Coach Todd Stones Galloway, he's telling him about, yeah, of course, our receivers are amazing, but the kid who unbelievably is doing some of the best work is Ryan Hughes. We saw a little bit from him in the last game against Queens, but Coach Michael Fultz said he has the best catch radius he's ever seen. Anywhere in this vicinity, he's coming down with the ball. He's got the speed for it. He's still a very young player, but both Coach Stones Galloway and Coach Michael Fultz both talked about Ryan Hughes and how he's going to be such a huge factor in this game, especially with a guy like Raiden Thorne out.
And the depth is obviously something that both these teams can tout despite those injuries. So on the Western side of things, you've mentioned so many of these names, and you brought up Dasani McIntosh, who's really come on the radar for us this year. But you go back to the game earlier this year where Laurier picked up the big win right here at University Stadium, a final score of 43-28. And we'll talk about that in more detail. But that's a game where Dasani McIntosh just showing off the explosiveness that he brings to the table. He got 105 yards, 2 touchdowns on 3 catches, which is absolutely ridiculous. We know, to contrast that with what we just talked about with a guy like Bray Messerius, Coach Zach Scotto, offensive line coach for the Laurier Golden Knights. We'll talk about some of the cool things that he does with his line momentarily. But the levels that Western team can attack you on with the multitude of running backs they have, and going back, as we talked about, to that creativity, the way they use the run, the pass, and having defenders' eyes go left and right, having them try to, where you can't cue on one thing at a time. It's such a great matchup, and both these teams do that equally, just equally. Now, in the run game, Tanner Nelms, from the first game that we saw this Laurier team and opening up their season in McMaster in week 1 to where they are now, they would not be what they are without Tanner Nelms. And that's including all the great things that they do with the returning, or I should say the now 2-time MVP in Taylor Elgersmo, all those weapons he has out there. We're going to talk about these defenses momentarily, and that defense for Western is stellar, to say the least. Tanner Nelms' year has been perhaps as special a season, especially given that came into the season with no Quentin Scott to be able to offset some of his production. What a year he's been putting on.
He has been playing some fantastic football. One of my favorite aspects about him, specifically as a former offensive lineman, is the fact of how hard he runs. He's not afraid of contact, and if anything, he does better after set contact. He makes contact with somebody, and very rarely is he ever going down with the first tackler. It's taken at least 2 or 3 guys to get him down consistently, but he runs hard. He's got great vision, and the speed is there as well. I was talking a little bit with our guy, Coach Zach Scotto, as well, going into this game, and say, yes, losing a guy like a Quentin Scott is a massive blow because of the shiftiness, because he has that everything along with that. But now that leaves room for Tayshaun Jackson, and we've seen all of the greatness from him. But having a very clear number 1 running back now allows Tanner Nelms to get more of a rhythm, understand his offense a little bit better, understand that offensive line, where the gaps are going to be, what the strengths are, and really be able to capitalize on that. We're seeing him get better and better and better as years go on, especially as a running back. With all the hits that you're taking, you expect some guys to be slowing down or whatever. He's speeding up. He gets better and better as the game goes on, and he is one of my favorite players to watch just because of that mentality that he brings to it.
That grittiness is something that I think is really defined by this Laurier offense, one that is impressive for a team that's so splashy with the way they score points big. We talked about what Laomi does in that blocking. We talked about what some of these receivers do, and that offensive line with Cooper Hamilton holding it down on the field side, as I'll let you talk about momentarily, is part of the identity of this team and that defense, as we'll get into momentarily, that I think is so special for a club that it's easy to get caught up in the points. This team will punch you in the mouth, and then they'll stand over you and laugh about it a little bit. And that gets them into trouble a little time from time to time. But I think it's such a great combination, a team that makes them, an aspect that makes them such a fun team to be able to root for and to follow, where it's not this kind of, sometimes you see it in the NFL, maybe like the Miami Dolphins, they'll score a lot of points, but when they face the adversity of a tough team, they will kind of fold like a, whatever. They're tough as well, and it starts on that offensive line.
It absolutely does. When you've got guys like Cooper Hamilton, Josh Reedfield on that Laurier offensive line, they have been playing some fantastic football, and a big reason why Laurier has been doing so well in this one. This year, Taylor Elgersma hasn't been getting sacked nearly as often. Now that goes into some of the passing game concepts as well as some of the offensive line play. But that O-line is playing fantastic. You can see the benefits of bringing back, of course, an entire offense, but specifically an entire offensive line. Now you've got guys who have played again with each other for at least a year. With these guys, I think 2 or 3, and you get tendencies down. You understand things. You understand, hey, when we're going on a 90 or 91 slide, when it's just a simple slide, I know I don't need to slide that far because he's got everything locked down. Or you know what, he's going to overset here to really take away the outside, so I know I can come in there with him. But you get those little tendencies after playing with a guy for long enough and seeing how do you react against certain defensive guys, whether they're a big bull rush guy, a speed guy, or whatever the case. You're seeing that chemistry on the field right now, and they're going to need their best chemistry and their best game against this team because, as you and I have said, the big aspect that we haven't really seen consistently from Western is that singular pass rush, and Soren Hallschmidt is doing that right now for the Mustangs.
He absolutely is. And that's a great transition to talk about this defense and both these defenses for the clubs on the day as Laurier makes their way back out to the field. Our guy Leomi over there, our guy Harner Dollywall dapping up his guys as they make their way out. They're looking beautiful in those purple jerseys. Obviously, as Mr. Grace said, he's picking a team wearing purple today. Western, as you can see behind us, wearing the white with the purple pants and those silver helmets with the decals on there. There's our guy Elgersma out there dapping up the boys and getting them ready to go. This defense, and I think it's partly as well what we're talking about with the offense for Western this year, under Coach Paul Gleason, who's been there and been around OUA football for as long as, you can talk about any defense coordinator as former rookie of the year, Ethan Gregorczyk takes the field over there. Soren Hallschmidt's done incredible. Our guy Max von Muhldorfer, OUA All-Star, and von Muhldorfer has been causing nightmares for offensive lines all year long. There goes number 4. Give me more. Ethan Jordan. Connor Ranzisi on the other side. We had talked about as far as possible snubs. We know Max Nixon is a guy that is an absolute load to deal with. Riley McLeod winning All-Stars in this year. But looking at Jude Buchanan, the way they send him on pressure is something that has been fascinating to see because early on, it was a product of them using him more of that 30 front. And maybe that was because it looked like Malcolm Frazier was out for them at the start of the year. Who knows? But the creativity they've been doing and creating pressure and having you have to use your eyes a little bit more. We know as offensive linemen, when you're having to communicate right up to the snap and look to say, oh, check jet, or we're going to get into a pinch protection, if you're whatever it's going to be, that's not where you want to be as an offensive line. You want to be firing off the ball. This Western defense has the horses to be able to beat you one-on-one. But it seems like they've been using the system a little bit more this year to get your goose on that angle as well.
Absolutely. When you look at the standard of Western Mustang linebackers, you think of way back in the day with John Serlo, Howell Kruba, now Riley McLeod, Jude Buchanan, Max Nixon. These are not guys that shy away from contact. These are the kind of guys where you're an offensive lineman, you're coming off a double team to try to get them, and you're getting smacked right in the mouth. And if you're not expecting that, that'll get you blown back. And that's how they're making plays. Jude Buchanan, when he's coming off the edge, is coming like a bat out of hell. Every single time he gets a chance to, he's coming hard, he's coming fast. And if you're not able to pick him up, if you don't have him out of your corner of your eye constantly, he's going to make you pay. He's going to get to the quarterback no matter what. What we've seen a lot is that this team in particular does a great job of getting to the outside pressures and forcing guys to step up where you've got a Max von Muhldorfer waiting for you to get that big sack or to get that pressure. So this defensive line and the blitzes that are coming in is specifically built to try and make quarterbacks uncomfortable. When you have a guy like Taylor Elgersma, he's not afraid to take off and run with it. But if that pocket starts to squeeze in on him from either side, there's nowhere else for him to go. He's got to get that ball out, and that's where guys like Jackson Finley, Richard Adu before, Kojo Ojum, those guys can really start to capitalize when that ball's in the air and it's uncertain. So this pass rush, and in particular the linebackers that are blitzing, is going to be a massive part into this and how well that Laurier offensive line can pick them up.
And I think that's where perhaps seeing the draw game and the run game for Laurier will come into effect. We've seen them use that, the delayed handoff to a guy like Taron Nelms, or even the quarterback draw. We saw them seal the win last week against Queens by having number 13 call his own number and pick up the first down to put that one to bed. And that's where I think the versatility on this day, I think what Western's going to bring out of Laurier is a little more creativity, because while we know you don't want to be caught in one-on-one matchups for too long against the likes of Ethan Jordan, even without Ray and Thorne out there, Leomi Ochetalaya, we've seen week after week now when he has a head of steam, no one can catch him, all those other great weapons that we talked about. This is where it's an interesting matchup, though, where maybe early on we're going to see, are they willing to sit in that pocket, trust their O-line, and I'm certain he does trust the O-line, and why wouldn't you with the names that they have on that and with how well they've been playing? But it's where we're going to see that cat and mouse. If he's not comfortable in that pocket, how is Coach Galloway going to try to change things up a little bit to get the ball quicker and let his guys make plays? And if that's the case too, these are sure tacklers for Western as well, and we know they're going to rally to the ball. This Laurier team, we know they can run the ball. We know they're splashy with the deep bombs, getting guys like Leomi over the middle and him pick up things with his athleticism. What are some of the ways you're expecting Laurier to try and attack this Western defense, given all those things that we've talked about, that they can play coverage, they can play man, they can bring Finley into the box and spy quarterbacks like Algersma, and they get after the quarterback, sometimes even, as we saw last week, against one of the best O-lines in Guelph, sometimes even just with those three guys rushing.
When you look at how well this Laurier offense has been rolling here, it really comes down to the incredible athletes that are across the field and how they're able to get things done. In particular, when you see how fast some of these receivers are and how quickly Taylor could just grab the ball, rock and throw, and hit a bomb down the field to a guy like an Ethan Jordan or Raiden Thorne, who's obviously out now, but a Ryan Hughes and everything else. That's really where I'm going to foresee Laurier trying to do this. They're going to try and spread that defense out, not allow Western to do whatever they have to try to get to the quarterback. And now, hey, there's a linebacker blitzing. Well, now you've got Ryan Hughes coming over the middle to hit with a quick pass. And any one of these Laurier receivers, if you give them space, they're going to take off and they're going to burn you for that. So a couple of times there, and you're going to be just set. What I really would love to see, we saw it a lot in Queens last week as well, those quick routes, those quick little tosses out to a guy like Ethan Jordan, out to any one of those receivers, is how you get Western off their backs and force them into that standard 40 front, and that's where Tanner Nelms can start to take over. That's really where I want Laurier to really go for.
Now, we certainly have to flip the script because obviously we have to talk about what Western has to do to deal with that great defense of Laurier. I would be remiss to not acknowledge just what's going on around us. Obviously, the teams are on the field warming up. We're getting the fans pulling in here from this side. You can hear the band rocking and rolling. You can hear the music going. It's a raucous affair going on here right now. It's a stellar atmosphere. Obviously, if you're sold out game right now, so if you aren't here yet, get your butt down here. Hopefully, you're tuning in.
Factor here, like some of the
now with the atmosphere here, obviously the number one thing, as I'll wait for Tom to come back here, is going to be able to see whether or not this Western team is going to look to get back to the ground game the way that we know they've dominated. Tom, just bring into account obviously the atmosphere in terms of with the fans coming in, the noise, the crowd, everything like this. But it's a beautiful day out here. Obviously, it's a day that's meant to throw the ball. We know that that's a prospect that teams have been able to have some success against Laurier. But we mentioned this in talking about the Can West matchup. We know that when we look at the numbers, that has more to do, no doubt, with the fact that teams are just having to play catch-up against them. They're having to throw the ball. When you look at how Western's been able to move the ball in all shapes and sizes, in the pass, on the ground, everything like that, we know Western football is built with that power G offense, getting behind those all-star laden offensive lines. Is it going to be more of that old school Western football, or is it the creativity that we've been seeing from them all year long that's going to be what, hopefully, for Western fans out there, wins them the day?
Well, it's that old school football that's allowing them to really get into some of the new stuff that we've seen. We saw in that original matchup between Western and Queens, one of our favorite plays where it is a counter tray going to the right, but a designed backdoor play. And if you know Western football, you know that they lead by counter trays. You know that wherever the most guys are going at the point of attack, that's where the ball is going. So you have a defense that's flowing to that, and that's what sets up going backdoor and getting back into there. So that's really where I'm foreseeing this come in, to lean on what they're really great at, but to help expand out into the new age of what's going on in here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to come into. And I know that's a little bit of a cop-out because I'm saying yes to both, but that's really where I've seen the great production here and how well they've been able to do things.
And speaking of running backs and great run games, former Western Mustang Banyan Cup champion Trey Humes is just entering the facility here. So, again, awesome to see the alumni in the building. This is a great affair, seeing alumni all across the place here. It's an awesome day to be out here at Wilfrid Laurier Stadium, University Stadium here for the 116th Yates Cup. It's pulling in. It's getting raucous in here. We are a bit less than an hour away from kickoff. Now, in that secondary for Laurier, though, again, let's go beyond the numbers here because we know that they trot out guys like Jahari Hastings, like Malik Kote, like our guy in Harnur Dhaliwal, and just all the other guys that make this defense so formidable in the back end. Ethan Gorsick in the middle, his ability to be able to play the run, play the pass, as we saw so well last week, not only getting an interception, but batting down a few more balls. This has to be the classic case of, well, when teams are playing catch up all the time. Trey Humes, we're live on camera right here. You want to show off some bling? Yes, sir. How you doing, sir? Good to see you, brother. I hurt my hand with all the.
Man, I brought the ice. Good luck. I didn't bring. Is this the camera right here?
Which camera are we on right now, fellas?
This camera right here.
Come on, sit on here.
I'm gonna sit down. Sit down. So listen, I didn't bring the good luck charms last time, and we ended up losing. We had a slow start, fumbled on the first drive. Terrible, right? So good luck charms are here. We're ready to go. The boys are ready. I know they're ready. My prediction: 37-28 Western. You heard it here first.
Trey, former running back, all-star Vanier Cup champ for the Western Mustang. Talk to us a little bit about the bling on your hand there. What teams are we repping here?
Yeah, man. So we got the ice from 2017. This was an undefeated season. I can let you look at that as well.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Undefeated season. We ended up beating Laval in the championship. It was a huge win. That when Chris Merchant was still a quarterback.
Yeah, that was one in Hamilton, right?
One in Hamilton, one in at home. And then 2021, the most recent one. This one's a special one too, right? Came back from that COVID season.
Yes, sir.
Nobody really knew what was going to happen. We have this freshman quarterback named Evan Hillock who comes in, right? We have Keon Edwards who steps on the scene, right? And then you got the old veteran, Trey Humes. You know what I mean? Antonio Balbano on
the Italian stallion.
You know what I mean? So it was just a perfect group, perfect storm, and we ended up winning it. So
Jay, we're right in the middle of the breakdown of these two clubs, and obviously a big part of going into this week with the awards coming out was the fact that no quarterback, no Evan Hillock on the All-Star list, no running backs. Can you even fathom a time where Western did get a quarterback or a running back on an All-Star list?
I honestly don't remember a year. Not first team, not second team, but at the end of the day, we're in the playoffs, we're in the championship, right? At this point, the individual accolades don't even matter. Like, the run is for a chip. Like, the regular season was a regular season. I can promise you none of those guys care about it, or if they do, they're gonna show it here. At the end of the day, like, they're trying to win a chip. It's bigger than MVPs, it's bigger than All-Stars. At the end of the day, if you can host that trophy, knowing that you're a champion, Yates Cup, Mitchell Bowl, UTEC, Vanier, go win it all. That's what it's about.
Now, when you're on those teams, obviously some of the bling that you have there are perfect seasons when you're going out and you're getting your thing done. But now you have a squad in Western who had lost to Laurier in the regular season. And now a team that doesn't need a chip has got a chip on their shoulder. When you look even in your first year with Evan Hillock and his production, he obviously was the Vanier Cup MVP. Talk about what you've seen from him now from that first year into where he is now.
Man, he's always been like cool, calm, and collected kind of guy. But he just seems so comfortable in this offense, right? I felt like in his first year, we did run the ball a lot. I found like as he's progressed, he's becoming the decision maker. He's making those throws that you need to make. And when the game's on the line, we're putting the ball in his hands. So we have to trust in him. Knowing we can still run the ball.
Yeah.
Don't forget about Keanu. Don't forget about Keon. Their numbers might not have been what it was in the past, but these guys are very capable of doing their thing. So don't be surprised if they go off for a couple touchdowns.
Trey, I love you brought that up because we've been talking all year on how we had to play against Western way back when, and then it felt like this year the offense got a little more creative than years past, where it used to be that power G offense, little play action look, bomb it down the field. With some of the play action looks, the RPO looks, but as he said, they're putting the ball in Evan's hands and letting him make decisions. Do you feel that the offense has kind of evolved to get a little more creative from your time?
For sure. It's definitely creative. I think when you have a quarterback who knows the offense, understands the system, we were able to get creative with Chris Merchant as well too, right? Because he was able to show, what he could do as a leader in that role. So once you become more comfortable in the offense, then it's those conversations with G Marsh, conversations with Coach Gates. It's like, okay, like how are we going to attack this team in a different way? Try not to be as predictable as possible, but at the end of the day, we got to do what we do best, which is run the rock. So if we can control the game on the ground, it opens up our pass game. And then as well, too, the positional battle, at the very least, as long as we can flip the field, right? Put Laurier, have them have to do a 90-yard, 80-yard drive to score. I'll take that versus giving them, 40 yards, 50 yards, and they can score in a quick, So,
Yeah, and you haven't really had to worry about punting all that often because you guys are scoring so damn often. This is the number one scoring offense in the entire country. How well they're able to do things, and certainly Evan, when he gets into any kind of a red zone, he's finding his guys more often than not. Seth Robertson is that guy. Now that he's back, he had a high ankle sprain. He's back in this game, and he's really performing as well as possible. As a former running back as yourself, if you could put your mind into what it was like for Keon Edwards and Keanu Yazbek now, obviously doing their thing and playing really well, but not getting any recognition as an all-star. Yeah. How well does that, or how much does that affect your mindset going into this one saying, okay, now you want me to prove something? I'll show you I can prove something here.
Hey, man, at the end of the day, they're ultimate competitors, right? So you know in yourself what you're capable of. I don't think Keon has to prove anything more. Like, if you can just look at his resume and be like, yeah, he's that dude, right? And just know that any game, it can happen. It just takes the run game is one of those things you got to stick with it. Stick with it. It might get a 2-yard pop here, 4-yard, 5-yard, 6, and then you bust that 60-yarder, and that changes the whole game, right? So you just stick with it. Stay locked in. But for those guys, it's not about trying to make the big play. It's just being the best football player you can be. Make the small plays. Make that block when you need to. Have that good play action fake to really draw those linebackers in. Do what you can do on special teams. Do all the little things. The other things will come, but don't worry about being the guy who's going to make the big play today. Just ball out and just do your thing. And I think that'll be fine. Good.
And Trey, and I love this just happened so serendipitously. You're walking in with like, that's a champion.
I got to hail up my guys.
Obviously, former players ourselves, we're trying to do our thing to represent the game and try and bring more attention to it. Both coaching a little bit. Last time I bumped into you was coaching with the Oakville Titans. What are you doing with the post-football career? You're still coaching? What is Trey Humes doing with his life?
Still tapped in, still coaching. So I was coaching the running backs. I'm 2 seasons under my belt now, and so we'll see what happens this summer as well too. But again, it's something I want to give back. Like all the coaches I ever had, like all volunteer, like never got paid for anything, just for the love of the game, right? And I feel like, especially where I grew up, like in the Durham region, like high school football is dying. Like, a lot of the schools that had football teams don't even have teams, and quarterbacks aren't even getting developed as much anymore. So I feel like anybody who can give back and pay it forward for that next generation, like that's what I want to do for sure. I'm always be around.
Can you imagine going in as a running back, having your coach, man? You're one of the best I ever feel. You're one of the best out of the Western Mustangs that have had years and decades of great running backs. So to have you here has been an honor, a pleasure, man. You're one of the best ever. And we appreciate everything you did for the game.
Of course, man. Hey, and you guys too, man. Since the beginning of At the 55, which is such a unique name because it's unique to the Canadian football. Like nobody else has a 55-yard line other than Canadian football, right? But you guys have been pushing it forward. The social media, just the overall presence and coverage. You guys have been killing it, so I'll always, show love to you guys for sure.
So I appreciate you, my man. I appreciate you.
Trey, go say what's up to your guys.
Yeah.
We're just talking about 2-time Yates Cup champ. Now we got Hamilton Ticat, former Glove Griffin, Kandre Smith. Holy cow.
Go set up for the boys.
Yeah, man. Come on in.
Proper setup.
Come on in.
Play musical chairs here. Holy smokes. What's going on, man?
We went from one outstanding former Western Mustang to another outstanding Griffin this time. Kandre Smith. Everything that you're doing, not only at Globe, but at the Hamilton Tiger Cats now, you're playing some of the best football I've ever seen you play. And I had a chance to be on the field in 2019 and see you ball out as well.
Man.
I can't believe how well you've been doing. It brings a smile on my face every time. So before we ask you any questions about OUA, I want to say I'm so proud of everything you're doing, my man.
Appreciate it, boys. I know you guys be following, keep your heads around. I know what you guys.
Well, I appreciate that you guys. Let's do it.
I appreciate you.
Kandre, you're obviously part of a legacy of some great receivers going from Guelph, making the jump to the next level. Schaefer Baker, obviously, being no slouch amongst the rest. Talk to us because we're watching a game here today where in a few years' time, we're going to watch these guys again at that next level, join your ranks at the CFL. What's been the biggest transition from you going OUA to the pros?
Biggest transition is really there is a skill gap, 100%. Like that comes with being a grown man, feel a bit faster, stronger. But that comes naturally. But there's also another. Yes, sir. There's also another side to it where people study the game a lot more at a much more intellectual level. So it really makes it a lot more of a chess game than the OUA tends to be.
Yeah, 100%. But when you have guys like, of course, when you see the great production or the great players that you're around the CFL, that brings you up. But being in that Guelph Griffin locker room, when you've got Clark Barnes, when you've got Keane Schaefer and yourself, you guys iron sharpening iron while you're on the same squad. Of course, you make an outstanding grad. Now, Keon, that's me the next time. I got to do this. And so, talk about that. Seeing your guys and seeing them ball out the second level as well.
Seeing them ball out after competing with them for really who wants to be that guy who wants to make that big play. Seeing them make their plays at the next level, honestly, it's a testament to the work that we put in and to the efforts that came through all those years. Like, yes, we did help each other, we did keep each other in life, but it was always a bit of a competition on its own, no matter what we were doing. So seeing them succeed is always great. And I know there's still a little internal competition there, but like, hey, who's really going to?
We of course got celebrity in the house, Kandre Smith. Now we're getting close to kickoff. Obviously, you got people in the house, and we don't want to keep it too long. Last thing I want to ask you about is that we have some stellar wide receivers on the field for this game today. Number 4, give me more. Ethan Jordan for the Golden Hawks. No Raiden Thorne up for this game, but Laomi Ojatalayo. And for the Mustangs, obviously Seth Robinson, Most Jamal, Raiden Masseri has some stellar performers. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to watching as far as the receiver play in this game?
I think both sides do have talented receivers, and I would give the edge genuinely to Laurier for this matchup as far as receivers go, especially with Taylor as a quarterback. But it's one of those things where,
Hey, boys, I just need to get to the other side and skip through.
Yeah. You should be able to, yeah.
100%.
You right?
I mean, there might have been a way right there. It's okay. We'll let him go by on the scooter. I would give the edge personally to the Laurier guys, especially with Taylor at the helm. Taylor's one of those guys who really stepping into his own personality-wise, leadership-wise, and it's fun. It's fun to see the guys fall in behind him and really follow his lead. And if he can motivate Ethan to really turn it to another level today, I think that's their key for the day. Since Ray Ray's out.
Do you have a pick going into this one?
Yeah.
Who you got? Who you got?
I'll never cheer for a purple pony a day.
There you go, man. Way back to when me and Dakota were speaking with you and some of the other guys at Guelph. Are you still rocking the Roots onesie?
Bruce onesie, staple. She's
All right. Kandre Smith, former Guelph Griffin and member of the Hamilton Tigers. The only guy that's wearing the yellow on today. Appreciate it so much, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me up here.
Yeah, man. Great to see you, brother.
Thank you, man.
A live show going on too?
Yes, sir, man.
Full live show, actually. Big
Yes,
time.
sir, man.
Guess
No
you
big
back
things
on the
here.
show whenever you want, brother.
Sir.
We'll catch you, man.
Appreciate you.
What a moment that was.
If you
Holy
can't tell,
smokes.
we've got a few outstanding alumni from former OUA schools and some of the best athletes on the planet right at this game in Waterloo.
And no surprise, obviously, we had Trey Humes that he's going with his Stangs, and perhaps no surprise that the former Guelph Griffin and Kandre Smith going against the Stangs on the day and picking up, going with Laurier for the day. Tom, I haven't a clue where we were. That was so cool. The pleasure of being here live. We're seeing folks pull on in, wearing purple of all shades from the Western to the Laurier ilk, and of course, Kandre repping the Ticats colors. I think we were talking about defense, but who knows at this point? The players are starting to come off the field now as we're a little more than a half hour away from the 116th Yates Cup. Where do you want to take the conversation, my man? Because I'm at my. That was too fun.
The last thing that we were talking about is this Laurier defense.
Yes.
When we talk about how well this Western offense is able to produce, and obviously the growth of Evan Hillock from that first year when he won a Vanier Cup MVP to now going into being established in this offense, having the playbook really open up and getting into those outstanding trick plays, not even trick plays, but variations on some of the old school stuff that they've been seeing. If you're the Laurier Golden Hawks here, number one, no matter what, is stop the run. If you cannot stop the run effectively against Western, you have no chance in this game. Guelph played them close in the last week's game because they were able to effectively stop the run more often than not. Now, even when you do that, you've got Evan Hillock back there who can throw the ball with the best of them and is certainly one of the top tier in the OUA and in the country here. So if you're the Laurier Golden Hawks, my bet is you stop the run as best as you can. You allow your guys in the back end. You really lean on your guy like Harno Dhaliwal, like Malik Cote, and everybody else in that defensive secondary to lock down those receivers. Western's going to get stuff done. They're going to do some great things. There's a reason why they're the #1 scoring team in all of Canada, but it's how well you can limit them that's really going to be the game changer in this game.
Most certainly. And, I think we're getting to that time now, Tom. I think we're getting to that time because we're closing in on the half-hour mark to the kickoff. And we heard Trey mention it himself when we asked him about the creativity that he's seeing. And the number one thing he said is like, well, you know what? We had Chris Merchant. We got a little creative. They got this kid, Evan Hillock, so they get a little creative. Chris Merchant, in case you forgot, former Craton winner, Yates Cup champ, along with Evan Hillock, obviously, in 2021. Evans had one bad game this whole year, and it was in this house against Laurier that picked them up the only loss. But let me tell you what an Evan Hillock bad game looks like. He went 18 for 31, picked up 322 yards, threw 3 touchdowns, and 1 untimely interception. That even Bayfield, who I don't know if we brought it up, is back for Laurier on this day. There's a lot of excitement in this place. We've seen, obviously, with Laurier, with the run that they've been on, dealing a little bit with penalties from time to time. And I don't doubt that they can handle the pressure, but with those objectionable conducts that we're starting to see become a bit of a regularity with that team. And you contrast that with Western looking at this as another Saturday. We look at all the angles on this one, and that defense that I just still can't get over with how good they've been playing. We've already made the picks on the podcast. They're up already, so it's not going to surprise you, and it's certainly not a hot take to do so. No. But, yeah, I'm going purple, but it's a Mustang purple. I'm taking on this day. Western picks up their 4th consecutive Yates Cup in Laurier's house today.
If that does happen, there needs to be a Greg Marshall statue out in front of that stadium with everything that he has done for those Western Mustangs, both as a player and now as a coach. When you look at this game and you look at all the capabilities that both of these squads have, of course, your Western pick is a great one. And it showcases how well this defense has really been coming along because that offense has always been there. The defense is really getting there as well. But I'm going with Laurier in this one. When you look at how fast they were able to score the ball last game against Queens, had a bit of a rough start, sure, and then 23 unanswered points in the last 4 minutes of the first half. This offense can explode at any point, and even with a guy like Raiden Thorne out, when you have a guy like Ryan Hughes who's just waiting to step up, when you have Laomi Ochitolai, Ryan Spade, Jace Atkinson, and all of those outstanding receivers, along with an outstanding offensive line, Tanner Nelms, and even Ethan Bayfield back in that defensive secondary, Laurier has been chomping at the bit. They've been right on Western's heels for the past couple of years. They get it done today. Laurier wins the Yates Cup.
And you know what? With the weather being so beautiful, it might go against my prediction that it might be low scoring. Again, the defense is regardless of the weather, whether it's a more classical mid-November Yates Cup matchup and a little bit of wind swirling and maybe even some snow as we saw in that Queens Western Yates Cup from 2 years ago. But I'm also still looking at Mr. October and Brian Garrity and what he brings to the table. Tom, fantastic job as always by you. Awesome job on the C2C. If nothing else, how we do it. If nothing else, I'm just happy I didn't catch fire from holding on to 2 Western Yates Cup championship rings that belong to, of course, our guy in Trey Humes. Some awesome action around the league, C2C, with the championship games going on. Final thoughts going into this outstanding weekend of youth sport football.
If you're tuning into us here, you have to tune into one of the other amazing games, preferably the OUA game that's happening on CBC Gem and anywhere else that you can find it. This is going to be a must-watch game from start to finish here. Both of the offenses are poised and ready to go, while the defense for Western and for Laurier has been stout all year. I'm expecting a high-scoring game in this one. It's going to come down to who has the ball last. You don't want to miss this game. Tune in and watch. And if you're not watching this one, you better be watching one of the other conference championships happening across the country today as well.
And of course, Tom, none of it happens without the help of our friends with Royal Media, getting us set up here week in, week out, making the Game Day Live part of what we can bring to the table to be able to continue promoting this great sport of football here in Canada. So shout out to Royal Media, Manny and Alex, for being here with us along the way. Holy cow, it's getting ready to pop off in here. So as Tom said, if you're not tuned in this one, you you better be tuning into one of these games across the country. But regardless, we'll be here to break it down for you. All the games right here at 55.